Welcome. This is a very, very special episode. I am exceptionally proud about this episode. We've been working for this for a while. We're going to get into it in just a second. Please check this out, and we'll be right back with a very detailed and inspiring episode. Well, there's a documentary out by Awfully Nice production company in partnership with Time Warner Podcasting about the Calexit movement and myself. Part 3 came out recently. Very pleased. And it was about the indigenous, and it was about the Calexit plan to return land to the indigenous. And it was very well. I wanted to cover some of the things that the documentary said and clear those up, and also show a little bit more about the Yes California plan by Calexit, exclusively by Yes California, not any other Calexit group backed this, just this. And I was one of the main champions, along with Jason, pushing this for years against massive amounts of pushback. And we'll cover the plan, and we'll cover how it's covered in the documentary, and we'll show you why you should be inspired. Okay, well, let's get right to it. So this is the Calexit documentary that just came out by The Last Resort. New podcast trailer dives deep into Calexit. Warner Music Group's podcast network, Interval Presents, and they are partnering with Awfully Nice production company, which is, and this person is also, Mr. Martinez is also the voice, all produced by Awfully Nice. Now, episode 3 of this came out recently. Here it is, episode 3, After the Gold Rush, The Last Resort. California has always attracted dreamers, but the California dream had a dark side. From this contemporary history, Marcus and Lewis saw an opportunity to grow their movement. Sources: The Last Resort After the Gold Rush. And let me show you a little bit about what they said. So in the documentary, in part 3, After the Gold Rush, was talking about the genocide of indigenous people. So the term Golden State, I like to say it came from the Golden State era of the 1970s and the poppies and the sunshine. Some other people say it came from the Gold Rush era. I think that's disgusting, because the Gold Rush era was nothing to be proud of. It was a genocide campaign that instituted a basically white nationalist apartheid government. So genocide, segregation, removing people's rights, making sure they couldn't vote, make sure they couldn't buy property, making sure they couldn't be in school with white children, and executions just straight up was what happened with the gold rush. So not a good look for California. And we've always said that. There was a couple things in the documentary that I wanted to clear up. Not that they said it wrong at all. They didn't. I'm not saying they said it wrong at all. Not saying they said it wrong at all. I just want to make sure that it's understood where Yes California came from. So the first thing in the documentary is they talked about how I'm purporting to say California culture is different from American culture. It is. And they talked about how American racism also existed in California, kind of drawing back on my claim that California culture is different from American culture. We totally agree, and we've always said that. We said that there was a California culture, and then illegal immigrants from America came in around 1847, 46, and instituted a white nationalist, white supremacist government where they told Black people, you cannot be in integrated schools, Asians, you can't own property, Latinos, you can't vote, and indigenous people were to have their heads chopped off, and you could get money for that in Sacramento. That racism that happened in the gold rush and happened in early California is because of the Americans bringing in the American culture, not because of California. California from the 1550 to 1846, 400 years, was a diverse place of indigenous, Latin, Jewish, French, Scottish, African-American, and Latin people all living together in harmony. Then it turned segregationist and racist when the Americans came. And it wasn't really till the 1960s when California culture started pushing back and saying, we don't want your American culture here. This is how we do it. The Black Panthers were coming out, Bobby Seals, that we really started getting California culture rising again. Always said that since 2012. Never said the gold rush was a great period. Always said it was a racist period. But we always said that it was American culture coming in. That culture didn't exist in California before. And it's on its way out now. And it was on its way out starting in the 1960s. And you can date that people came here illegally and instituted it. It wasn't just people here. The people here didn't set up an apartheid government. Foreign people came in illegally and instituted an apartheid government and set up racism. Those are Americans. That's American culture, and it came from America, and it was not organic California culture. Always said that. Now, some similarities I want to point out was that they talked about how the Vegas brothers, who were indigenous, changed their name to Vegas, were told to act Italian in order to pass at that time. I was told to act Sicilian as a Latin male. So in the 1990s in California, which was our tipping point, I was told, you're Mexican, but why not say you're Sicilian? So when they said, here's these Vega brothers saying, hey, we were told act Italian, I knew exactly what they were talking about. I experienced the same form of racism. Now, one of the other things they talked about was that when the Vega brothers went to Texas, they were rounded up and chased out. That happened to my mom. I've told this story a couple times. My mom went to Texas. She was sitting with my father, who was Caucasian, and that was not allowed in Texas. White people, Mexican people don't sit together. So that did not go over well. And they literally chased my mom and my father and my Tia Maria Elena out. So similarities with the documentary and the racism that the main characters felt. I saw the same thing. So I agree. The documentary also said there was a section on non-Indigenous with good intentions telling Indigenous what to do. So they talked about how there's a history of people who are not Indigenous having good intentions, and it always screws up the Indigenous. And they kind of said that right before they introduced the Yes California plan. And I'm not really Indigenous, like full Indigenous. I'm part, but Choctaws from Oklahoma. It's not a California tribe. And the other guy mentioned was not Indigenous at all. Here's the thing. Kind of inappropriate to suggest that we never said ever that we were telling the Indigenous what to do. What we said was, you never got to have a vote, ever. So why don't you have a vote, which you're legally entitled to? And then you could decide what you want to do with the land. If you want it returned to you, great. If you don't want it returned to you, okay. If you want to do it in partnership with California, fine. We didn't say, I know what's best for the Indigenous, we should just force all the land back on them. We said, these people never had a vote, so why don't you give them a vote and they can choose for themselves? That is the total opposite of a non-Indigenous person saying what's best. We're saying, why don't you pick out what's best for you? Always said that, never said anything different. Now, the documentary didn't claim that we did, but I wanted to point that out. Another thing from the documentary, they were talking about how, yes, California returned half the land. And they go, well, they're not giving up Beverly Hills or Hollywood, so it was kind of a cheap deal. That's insulting to Indigenous. So Indigenous people don't want condos. If they actually care about their culture and who they are and their heritage, they want their land back the way that it was during their ancestors' times. They don't want a condo and lots of money as long as the streams are polluted and the forest is burned down and all the animals are dead. What they want is the way things were during their native times when land was taken away from them and genocide was committed to them. Nobody ever asked them if they wanted to move into the modern era. They were forced to. So a lot of Indigenous don't necessarily want Hollywood or downtown Oakland. One of my favorite stories is Shellmound Street in Oakland. The Indigenous said, hey, this is part of our land. You want to build this development in Emeryville City near Oakland. The Indigenous didn't say, cut us in for a percentage of the condos. They said, you're going to make something that looks like a gigantic mound of seashells. Because when we were here, that's how we decorated the area. And we want you to recreate it. And I think they told them to do it with real seashells. They couldn't. They made it kind of a concrete structure. But the point was, is the Indigenous could have been brought in on this major development deal. No. We want recognition of our heritage and the way the land was. So when I hear people say, oh, the Yes California plan doesn't return Hollywood and Oakland to them, are you sure they want it the way that it is? I mean, have you actually talked to these people? The other thing is that one person criticized us for saying, oh, you're returning all the undeveloped land to them. And they kind of pointed that out in the documentary. So what? I mean, if you talk to the tribes of the land that was going to be returned to them, they don't say, oh, you know what would be great? I mean, this land's okay and it's pristine the way our ancestors had it, but we should screw it all up and pour concrete over it and high-rise buildings because we'll be richer. Nobody talks that way. So the indigenous that would get the land returned to them like the land the way that it is. They don't view it as crappy land or second best land because it's their homeland. It's the best land in the world for them because their ancestors were on it. So just because we're giving undeveloped land back, they don't see it as a shot against them. They're happy. And you got to realize that indigenous people do not have the same values as Californians. They want to return to their ancestral times or as much as they possibly could. They're not interested in sports cars and condos, at least not as tribal nations. So it's kind of incorrect to say, oh, they're getting second best land when we're returning the land as they had it to them. The other thing is that we talked to Canyon Root Sayers of the Ohlone and Juliana Acosta of the Pomo, and they understood when we talked to them about this, and many other people, I'll show you in a second, indigenous people understood if you're going to return California to all of them, it would be destructive. And here's the thing about the indigenous I met. They're not cold-hearted monsters. They understand there's 40 million people in California. They understand there's a lot of children. They understand there's a lot of poor people. And yeah, they want their land back, and it'd be great if we go back in time. But I didn't hear them say, you know, it'd be great. Screw all the kids. Screw all the poor people. Get the hell out. I don't care about the amount of human misery it costs. They recognize that trying to give all California back would be horrendous to a lot of people. Maybe not natives, and they would suffer. And the natives that I met were warm people who didn't enjoy the concept of human suffering. And I think a lot of this comes down to is people who are liberals but haven't actually talked to the natives versus people who talk to the natives. So let's cover the Yes California plan for the indigenous, and let me show you a little bit about that. So this is the original plan. Calexit supporters revamp campaign with plan to convert half of California into autonomous native nation.
Air Pro is designed to auto-adjust to dirty air and protect living areas and workspaces.
One second.
Up to 1,000 square feet, engineered for professional spaces.
Okay. So this is the article. July 2018. This was the plan. Return about half of California back to the indigenous. And I went on Fox News to suggest that personally. Here's another article by Fox. They asked about Elizabeth Warren, and they were kind of joking, oh, she's native, could be she. And then I go, well, she's not a California tribe, so it doesn't matter if she calls herself native. They seem to love that. I was just pointing out what indigenous always tell me. If you're part of our tribe, great. If you're not part of our tribe, we don't care that you're also indigenous. You don't mean anything to us because you're not part of our tribe. Here you go. This was the original plan.
Well, the plan to break California off from the rest of the United States is back with an interesting new twist. The leaders of Calexit have announced a new version of their scheme to create an independent California. In this, all federal lands in the state, which is about half of all of California, will be returned to American Indian tribes, creating, quote, the first ever autonomous Native American nation in North America. Organizers say this country would provide a buffer zone between the California Republic and Trump's America. Marcus Ruiz-Evans is co-founder of Calexit and always game enough to come on our show. We appreciate that. He joins us tonight from Fresno. Marcus, thanks for coming on.
So, Tucker, thanks for having me back on again, and I came prepared. I brought you your shirt. I'll ship it to you after the show.
I love it. I will wear that, ironically, of course. So, I'm looking at this plan, and I notice that the Indians are getting the inland parts, the eastern parts of California, and everybody else is getting the choice real estate where the majority of the state's population live. If you really wanted to atone for historic sins, why wouldn't you give the Indians Santa Monica, La Jolla, right? Napa? Why not do that?
Good point. That's a great point. You're totally right.
Yeah.
You know, the best thing to do for Native American people would be to give them back all of the land, and everybody who's not Native would leave, and then petition to become an immigrant, and then Native people could choose who they wanted to come back in. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So what we did...
Tucker did not like it when I said that. See how his face changed from laughing to what?
Calexit would say, what's the best thing that we could do that's not going to fix genocide, isn't going to fix everything, not make it all perfect, but what's the biggest leap that we could make in the right direction? And we felt that giving over half of California, basically the American controlled part, to Native people who actually own the land would at least be a step in the right direction. And I want to point out...
Now, you're basing this... Can I just ask you... No, I know. This is all... It's California. You know what I mean? Like, you'll figure it out. It's a work in progress. But is there a specific Indian reservation that you think is a kind of model for good governance that you're basing this on? Can you point to a reservation currently in the United States and say, we want California to be more like that?
No. Well, first, we don't call them Indians. We call them natives or indigenous. Second, we don't call it a reservation.
A lot of Indians call themselves Indians, just so you know. Okay.
I'm not trying to debate. I'm just saying how we in Calext refer to it. It's definitely not a reservation. And to answer your question, we're doing it as not a reservation because there is no good model of a reservation. Reservations are a failed system by Americans to make up for the genocide that they caused against Native people.
I agree with that, actually.
Forbes magazine pointed this out.
No, I mean, it's demonstrably true. The reservations are a disaster for the people who live on them. I totally agree with that. Are you worried, though, that this could be open to exploitation? I mean, what would prevent Elizabeth Warren from coming in as an Indian and saying, I'm now the king of this new country? And would there be some test to make sure that you really are an Indian before you take possession of half of California?
So I want to point out what I said was that reservations aren't working out because of America. America does not let Native people own their land. They're not able to take profits from it. The FBI can go and harass them anytime. The schools provided for them are horrible. The court system provided for them is horrible. And they don't even have the ability to protect their own drinking water, as we saw with the protests recently. To answer your question specifically, Elizabeth Warren would not be able to come in there unless the Native people of that area said that she's welcome. So if the Native
she is a Native. Well, hold on, Marcus. Slow down. She is a Native person,
which is their call, then yes, she could. But if they didn't do that, it doesn't matter what she says, she wouldn't be allowed in.
Okay, well, I think now you're winning me over. Now, I just want to know how this works. So the idea is this is atonement for things that happened a long time ago. So if one of my ancestors had something stolen from him 150 years ago, does that mean that the descendants of the person who stole it owe me the money with interest, if I can find them? This is under your kind of system of justice. Yeah, it is.
So not at an individual level. So if your grandfather did something racist and horrible, you shouldn't be punished for that. However, you did benefit from it, but it's a mistake to go after you as a person. So what we're saying is that the people and the government representing the people should make amendments. So we're not saying we're picking on individuals. We're saying the government of California.
Wait, but millions of people live in this area. We're almost out of time, but what's going to happen to the millions of people who live in this Indian country, like who aren't Indian?
Well, the primary Trump voters who live in that area will have to do what brown-skinned people tell them to do, because brown-skinned people will be in charge. And if they don't like that, they're welcome to leave California.
Wow, re-education camps.
He loved that. I didn't say re-education camps. I just said, Trump lovers who are racist can leave. So that was the original Tucker Carlson moment when we announced this plan and put it out there. Now I'm going to show you some of the details of what the plan actually said. Okay, so you can see for yourself. So we don't need that. We don't need that. And we don't need that. So the plan was this. This is a map of all of the indigenous in California by language group and then also by territory. The area in red was the federal lands that could be returned to them. The area not in red is the lands that would stay with California. All the tribes listed are the tribes that would be part of the conversation. So when we started this, we identified every single tribe and by area who would need to be part of this conversation, because specifically we had to reach out to them. We did some advertising for it. And here's Canyon Sayers Roots. So like I was saying, there was 2 indigenous that backed us up. With my recent learning about Calexit and Yes, California, my voice of support and endorsement is saying it needs more California native presence. It needs more inclusion. It needs more visibility. I'm not signing on for what is there now because it still feels like a Band-Aid fix. If indigenous people are brought on to talk about it, to engage in consent on what they want to go forward, then the potential blueprint gets a chance to be engaged on at an integral level. That's from Canyon Root Sayers. And she said that at the Soil Not Oil Conference, September 9th, 2018 in San Francisco, on the panel Protecting Nature in the U.S. Constitution panel discussion from minute 4545 to 4848. Canyon was one of the indigenous people that we worked with. Another indigenous person that we worked with was Julina Acosta. Here's Julina Acosta working with Yes California as we tried to educate the POMO on federal, state, and local regulations.
Welcome. This is another
for the Tule elk. So the Pomo Country Elk Management Plan, that's how Julina Acosta wanted to call it. That's her, the POMO. And she was working with us too at Yes California. And this was a special presentation we did after making contact with her and the POMO about educating them on all federal regulations and state regulations, so that they could argue with the federal government to get their land returned to them, or at least the Tule elk. We put a lot of research into this, as you can see. All the slides on the left. It was about, 20 pages. Jason was the primary focus on connecting with Julina, but we did about an hour and 4-minute discussion with them, where we went over this in detail. Recompense has never been paid to the POMO by the CA government, even though it committed a Nazi-level organized genocide against this nation. So we were not, being careful with our wording. California did wrong. But there's one of the indigenous we worked with, Julina Acosta, and this is the elk management plan we did with them. And then I just showed you a reference from Canyon Root Sayers, the other indigenous person we worked on. Here is some of the news coverage we got when we presented the original plan to present to return native land back to the indigenous. Give me 1 second. Los Angeles Times, Calext leaders are back with a new plan. Newsweek, Calexit supporters relaunch California secession campaign. ABC News, new Calexit plan. Fox News, Politico. So LA Times, Newsweek, ABC News, Fox News, Politico all covered it. And what is the plan exactly? Well, here you go. This is the federal land in California. So that's a picture of all the federal land broken up by who owns it: Forest Service, National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management. And then here's where it gets interesting. So this is a population map of California. I work in government, so I have access to a lot of specific detail. We overlapped the federal land on top of the population of California. And what you'll notice is that almost all of the heavy population in California is not on federal land. So if you look at the dark clusters, the dark green and dark yellow, all clustered around, basically none of it's on federal land. If you look at the federal land area, it's almost all white with little dots. There are some exceptions. If you go to the Tahoe area, there's a little bit. And if you go to the Inland Empire area near Palm Desert, there's a little bit of a difference. But 97% of the population is not on this federal land. So we would not be giving up much population to return this land to them. That's why we proposed it. People couldn't complain. They couldn't go, oh, you're going to give up so much. No, we're going to give up a place where almost nobody lives. The population is super rural, low density, and it doesn't have many Californians in it. So it's not a big deal if we wanted to give it up. We wouldn't have to move too many people. Not too many people would be displaced. Now, this is an economic activity map from a study. Now, those red lines show economic activity between urban regions. And what I'll point out to you is you can see there's almost no red in the blue area. The blue area is the federal land that would be returned. Go ahead and try to notice the red area there. There's a little bit around Barstow and a little bit around Tahoe, and then basically every area in blue, which is the federal land that would be returned, doesn't include any economic drivers of the California economy. That's the other reason we proposed it. You can't say, oh, you're going to displace Californians. Not really. Most Californians don't live there. Oh, you're going to hurt the California economy. Actually, not really. Most of the economy doesn't interact there. And so you're saying, look, you basically lose nothing giving back all of this land. It doesn't affect our people. It doesn't affect our population. And here we put the federal land over the existing tribal locations. So you could get a detailed view of what tribes have existing land and how much it would change for them. Super detailed view. We also proposed that the indigenous could go for the Palm Springs style government. So if you look at that, Palm Springs has a deal with the Agua Caliente band of Cahuilla Indians. The band of Cahuilla Indians in Agua Caliente in Palm Springs is the richest group in all of California. And the reason is they own half of the city. See those brown checkers? That's all indigenous owned. See everything else not brown? That's non-indigenous owned. So if you want to do development in Palm Springs, you can't do it without getting permission from the indigenous, which means you got to buy it. So we said you could have a checkerboard joint government as an example of what to do, good governance, as an option. We didn't say you had to take all the land back. We didn't say you had to do this. We said you could have a vote, and here's an example of what to do, or you could keep it all, or you could do it in partnership with California. And we got this idea from Bolivia did some of this. And then we also got it from the United Nations. The United Nations had said, in addition, indigenous peoples interpret and react to the impacts of climate change in creative ways, drawing on traditional knowledge and other technologies to find solutions which may help society at large to cope with impending challenges. The other thing we said was the World Resource Institute, the U.S. Global Change Research Program, Yale's Global Institute of Sustainable Forestry, and the United Nations all said, if you want to handle climate change, have indigenous people help manage your forest. Well, that federal land is almost all forest. So we were saying we could deal better with climate change and have less pollution if the indigenous were running it. It's based upon previous examples from other countries that worked. There's good examples for joint government if you want. And it affects almost no one in the California economy. And it affects almost none of the population of California by percentage. Now, that was the plan, and that's why we did that, because it'd be no economic effect and no population effect. And so you really couldn't complain about, oh, we're giving up half of California, and you don't live there, and it won't affect your economy or your lifestyle, and it will help return the nature back to its original state and reduce pollution and help with climate change, which are all California big goals. And then here is a PowerPoint put together by our partner, Canyon Root Sayers, on how indigenous can manage the land better. This is by her. And then notes on the slides, also by Canyon Root Sayers. So we also did this. Native people know how to handle climate change better than them. This was the other argument we were putting out there, that, you know, California could do better managing climate change and reducing pollution if we had indigenous running it. We were one of the first groups to point that out and put all these references out there. Now, I also want to point out that this idea goes way back. So here's the book, California's Next Century. There's the map where I talked about indigenous natives need to get their land back, and they lost land. So here it is. Here's where I also talked about how we would return massive tracts of federal land to the indigenous. This is one of the first videos I did around 2011, before the book, I think, was even officially published. And massive tracts of federal land right there. Crappy graphics, but going all the way back, we were talking about returning massive tracts of federal land in the book, all the way back in 2012. So it was baked in from the beginning. The other thing is, I want to point out this. So there's me on the left. Now go all the way over to the far right. That's Jesse. That's another colleague. And then third one in from the right is Marta Frausto. So the only female on this discussion panel is indigenous. That's Marta Frausto. She's an OTOMI and knows all the indigenous people in California. And so in 2013, I organized a panel discussion on Calexit. This was the first discussion. Remember, the OTOMI was there. It was part of the very first discussion about a Calexit. So that is the first televised discussion about Calexit that I had. There's an OTOMI member right there, Marta Frausto edit. So Calexit didn't even talk without having indigenous people there. And the book wasn't even published without us talking about indigenous people getting the land back. So this idea is baked into Calexit and goes way, way, way back. So that was the plan and how we were going to do it. Let me show you a little bit. Whoops. So this was the first listening session. Here's where the invites that went out. So we sent this out to indigenous people. We had a variety of listening sessions with them. This was the original invitations that went out. We had about 7 listening sessions with 10 to 13 different tribes. And then there's here is the email that went out to all these people, signed by me directly. And we launched the Return California. Here's the first book event we ever booked. Listening Circle announced to discuss returning all federal land in California to indigenous July 30th, 2019. And it was on Nisenan territory. The Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe welcomes Canyon Roots Sayers to host a listening circle for Return California. Yes, California's new Calexit initiative. Canyon is Costano and Ohlone. So the Ohlone are on the west coast, whereas the Nisenan tribe is on the east coast of California. I'm sorry. The Ohlone are on the west side of California, and the Nisenan are on the right side of California. And so these two tribes came together to talk about returning land. And here is the first video. These pictures. There's Canyon, Ohlone, and Nisenan meeting together to talk about returning land. Would having land returned promoted to people? So these are people from 2 different native tribes talking about having land returned to them. And here's even more indigenous people discussing this, more indigenous people talking about this. How would land, there's a group of indigenous people. So, and then as I pointed out, here's the federal land. There's almost no population that in the area would be giving up. There's a lot of indigenous people already in the federal land area, so it'd work out for them. More of those maps. I think I missed that map. The other thing that we did was we made this map of all the genocides and abuse that's happened to indigenous people. To my knowledge, we're the only group to do this. So we're the only group out there. Yes, California Calexit under me made this map, and it documents all the genocides and broken treaties and zero land ownership and mass killing sites in California. And it's based upon all these references, and it even has the, there you go, there's a stamp of the heads. And that phrase is saying paid. So those are receipts paid for indigenous heads by California. So we did not shy away talking about, there's the original treaties for California for the indigenous violated. There's the original Manifest Destiny map. So we were not shy talking about how this would go. So, and how racist California was. I do want to point out, Clear Lake and Lake County, Bloody Island Lake Massacre, Marsh Creek State Historic Park, mass killing site, the Mattole are not gone, and the Barbareño are not extinct. So somebody from the Clear Lake Indigenous, somebody from the Marsh Creek, somebody from the Mattole, somebody from the Barbareño contacted me and said, change your map. And I did. And what I found amazing was they said, this is the only map out there. So here are indigenous people who contacted me to say, update this map because it is the only map of its kind. Only, yes, California did this map, not the California government, not anybody else, not the Democratic Party. And only California did this reference all federal state regulation um,
And
with
it's
the
just another
POMO.
map showing it's this one. And
We're the only group that reached out to the POMO to try to get them to fight the federal government so they could get better regulations for their own people. And we're the only group to do this indigenous map. And we were the only group to suggest returning land to California. Here is some of the indigenous people. Here are some of the indigenous people that we interviewed. So this is Return California, the group that was created by Yes California. And here are videos of the indigenous people saying how they want their land returned. So Return California, 7th roundtable, 6th, 5th roundtable, Return California listening roundtable, 4th roundtable. So here, I'm going to play them all.
I'm a mountain miner, and I was asked to help build some barkhouses here.
Ricky
And
Prowse,
so
the Mountain Maidu,
that's what we're
hosts
trying
this
to do.
roundtable. That's another indigenous person, and we're having this roundtable with indigenous people.
Happy to be here
There's
with all
another.
of you today. My ancestral village is in the Santa Monica Mountains, and that is shared territory of the Chumash.
Like that are working together.
So these are all indigenous people who showed up to talk about returning land.
But
That was the 7th roundtable. Let me show you the 6th listening roundtable.
and so basically for me, it's pretty awesome time to be at that because
Here's another one. That's Les. He's a member of one tribe. And the guy he's talking to is a member of a different tribe. So this is the 6th roundtable. Pan Pakan of the Maidu, name for ceremonial barkhouse. That guy's also indigenous. This guy's, I think, indigenous. And they were talking while they were building a indigenous barkhouse. That was the 6th one. Let's go to the 5th roundtable. Here you go.
On my own traditional territory.
All those indigenous people. There's Jelena. There's some
to
Calexit
support,
people. There's some other
the
indigenous.
efforts of
Uh,
whatever, how they're giving us government food.
so this is the 5th roundtable, even more indigenous. Juliana Costa of the Ukiah Pomo. Okay, let's go to the 4th roundtable with Steve Walensky.
Talking to folks from the Chupta and other Maidu crews that have had their projects.
This is a professor, I believe, at UCLA on Indigenous Studies and also Indigenous.
And I live on Tonga land. I'm originally from Hawaii Island in Hawaii. I am non-native, but was raised on Kanaka Oiwi land, and it's my pleasure to be a part of this and these listening sessions.
Thank you so much, Joy. Julia, is it Vivash or Viviash? How do you pronounce that?
Hi, it's Steve-ish, as far as I know. Yeah, I am at the UCLA grad student. I'm studying library and information studies.
Kraus, just able to join. I was actually the first.
Here to learn and listen. So thank you for having me.
Or
We pursued a number of avenues
on the call?
So that was the 4th session, even more indigenous. Let's go to Ali Metters Knight. This is another listening with Ali Metters Knight. She is famous in the indigenous community. That's her right there speaking. There's even more indigenous people. There's the UCLA professor, a couple other people showing up. And Ali Metters Knight ran that conference.
To even make those agreements with tribes. Tribes were almost had a higher stature.
And then we have some other interviews. Susan Campbell. They name their tribe and then they say return land. See the tattoos on the face? That's hardcore indigenous. See that hat and stuff? That's hardcore indigenous. They're all saying return land. She said that in indigenous language for her tribe, return land. Here's Les. Les Hall's awesome. 1 second.
My name is Les Hall of the Mountain Mighty.
So that is it. You saw we had at least 7 listening sessions where we met many indigenous people and talked about this. This might be another listening session.
I really.
Oh, there's another indigenous person.
This collaboration. We have.
So Francis Regal of Todd Valley, Miwok, Maidu in Placer County, talking about traditional ecological knowledge. So even more discussions with indigenous. The site is called Return California. And so you can see that at Yes California, we held a genocide map, the only one in California. We did a training for the POMO on fighting back for federal land. We're the only ones to do that. And we proposed returning federal land to the indigenous, and we were frankly the only group to do that very publicly. And then we went out and met in 7 different listening sessions with multiple tribes up and down California. And we had people from the POMO all the way to the tribes out of San Diego and out of Los Angeles were hearing about this and participating. And the thing they told us is nobody ever asked them if they wanted their land back. So that's 3 firsts. Genocide map, only us. Returning land, only us. Talking to indigenous about returning land, only us. Working with the POMO or an indigenous group to teach them how to fight back against federal law, only us. So, and we've been talking about federal land I had since before the book was published. Let me show you a couple more things real quick. Oh, this is really cool. Check this out.
Here today so that we can have a listening session about this new idea that's being proposed. And I'm glad that you make it. And I want to bring Canyon up. And I'm so glad that you're here, Canyon, and you made the trip. And I'm glad that you traveled safely.
These are 2 people from different tribes.
I'm so embarrassed a little bit to say that we have to leave right away. No, he just got called over there, and so I wanted to make sure though that I stayed long enough to invite you. We've got some other recent on purpose in the room, and it's a pleasure to have you.
So Shelly is of that tribe, so she has to publicly allow Canyon, who's not of the tribe, to hang out with them. And she's saying, I'm going to take off, but I'm saying you're cool, so you can hang out with us. And traditionally, if you meet another tribe, you have to give a gift. So Canyon is giving her a gift of, I think, a potted plant with soil. It's very significant so that she can grow her own crops. And then you offer a song. So Canyon's going to sing for her from her grandmother so she can share her traditional culture with another culture in a song. And this is another gift. A song can be a gift just like a physical thing in indigenous culture.
That is Canyon's grandmother's song because I can only sing a traditional Chumash grandmother's song with a mentor. And the song came to me from Canyon's talk. And this song is meant to be shared with our intertribal community, our international community, publicly, and is completely recorded. This is a grandmother song to honor our grandmothers, their grandmothers, and all Mother Earth. Without that, without her, we would not be here. We share this time and space together for a reason. It seems with humility, gratitude, and present that I have the song and the space here today.
I don't know if you can look at it, but Shelley, who's on the right there, is tearing up. So that was a very beautiful song, and it meant a lot to them. And that's how they do it with Indigenous culture. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure to show you something else. Yeah, just to review. I want to do one more review just so that it's clearly understood what we were saying. So if you go, how Californians honor Indigenous treaties, aka the plan for Return California. There's some advertisements we did, return stewardship. This is some more advertisements we did. We identified the exact tribes. We did some advertisements to say, hey, we'll help you take this land back from the feds. Some Indigenous people supported us. Here's some of the response we got from newspapers at the time. And here is the actual plan. So this is all the federal land. We identified it by who owns it. And then we did this. This is a population map. So the white area is the federal land. Almost no population. The green and yellows populated areas. So we're always going to lose no population. Secondly, we also found an economic activity map of California. So the area in blue is the federal land. Almost no economic activity. Economic activity stays with us. So from the California Department of Finance, that's a population distribution map. I'm not sure that link will still work. Oh, it does. Well, you can see it came from the California Department of Finance, so it's not, janky. Economic geography of California. Here we go. Economic geography of the United States mega regions, accept all cookies. That's where the data comes from. There's the original source right there. So just pointing out, and then we also pointed out that the Indigenous would be better at managing the land than us Californians, according to the United Nations, the World Resource Institute, the U.S. Global Change Program, and Yale's Institute of Global Studies. So basically what we said was people aren't going to lose land. They aren't going to lose the economy. This is going to be a start. We're not saying Indigenous have to have it. We're saying Indigenous need to have a vote. And so I wanted to show you all the things that we did for the Indigenous and how much outreach we did for the Indigenous as part of this plan. And it's great to see that it is now being held up in this documentary. Let me bring that up again. So this is all about this documentary. And here's the After the Gold Rush, part 3. So I wanted to explain some of the things they said, make sure that you got the correct understanding from us. And I wanted to explain the plan itself. And I wanted you to see how we outrolled it and all the other things we've been doing for the Indigenous. Did we make mistakes? Yes. Are we Indigenous? No. Could we have done it better? Yes. Should we have been more culturally sensitive? Yes. But did we do things that nobody has even bothered trying? And did we get further than anyone in California ever? Yeah. Nobody's worked out to tell the Indigenous how to fight back against federal regulations. Nobody's made a genocide map of the Indigenous. Nobody's proposed returning this much land to them publicly. And nobody's met with them to say people should start talking to you about having your land returned. We at Yes California did all those things. Democrats didn't do it. Green Party, Libertarian Party, all these other social progressive groups, none of them did it. We were the only ones that could for whatever reason. And as I showed you, this idea goes back to 2011. It's baked into Calexit from the very, very beginning. And we don't stop. I wanted to end on this. So here is Mark Charles. Mark Charles is the author of Unsettling Truths. Mark Charles is a world famous Indigenous leader, not of a California tribe, but for writing the book Unsettling Truths, where he points out Indigenous people still don't have rights under the American Constitution. And I directly asked him, about the plan to return land to California indigenous, and he said that's a great idea.
You do it with their book. You do it with their book. You hit them when it John.
I'm sorry, there's a voice in the background that's distracting, but it basically it happened.
1016, which is many things that you know nothing about. And they teach people to walk through their fences.
So I just told him we had a genocide in California. He goes, "Yep, that's him nodding."
Wouldn't it be a good way to at least start reparations by returning all family land to the indigenous? We suggested that. I've been on Fox arguing with them, not agreeing with them. And in turn, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Los Angeles Times, editorial board, that's not a reporter, that's everybody that works in the newspaper, and the press enterprise out of San Bernardino, and a high-ranking indigenous leader, I believe, in the Royal Band of Indigenous out of San Bernardino, all said, we don't need to have this conversation because if Native people wanted their land back, they would have already gotten it back. That's what the LA Times editorial board said. That's what the San Francisco Chronicle editorial board said. That's what a high-ranking indigenous person said on TV, and that's what the press enterprise out of San Bernardino said. And, you know, I'm not criticizing, but none of the indigenous, when we talked to them later on, heard of that or ever criticized it. So if we can get the conversation going, then people won't even criticize. And the two major newspapers in California will say, you indigenous don't want your land back, you would have already said so. And nobody says anything this after 2018. How far are we going to keep this? When did this happen? 2018. I can send you all the references. Yes, it did. No one did anything about it. This is what's fascinating, and this is where no one wants to have the conversation about that type of thing, right?
So Mark Charles basically backed up the whole idea, said it's good, and yeah, I understand how the system, and there's some sellout Indians or Native people who will stand against that. So that was our plan. Let me take a look at the comments. If they're relevant, I'll post them. If they're not, I will not. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks, Daniel. I really appreciate the comments. We tried to do a lot. Could have done better, made a lot of mistakes, but I wanted you to see that we were sincere and we meant it. We meant it when we talked about it in 2011, 2012, meant it when we talked about it in 2018, and we still mean it when we're talking about it in 2022. Still dedicated, still think it's a good idea, still the only group to present it, and we wanted to make sure that was clear. Thank you all for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.